It's not reassuring for civilians when mafia lords are fighting each other. We should not be deceived by people just because they're fighting ISIS, because there are people who fight ISIS who are just as bad as ISIS. So that should not be the litmus test. The litmus test should be the authenticity and the rootedness in the tradition. What we have been doing for the last few days under the able leadership of Sidi Imran bin Muhammad and his colleagues in various institutions here in Malaysia and some colleagues from Indonesia is basically looking at kalam, which is a discipline of reflection and philosophical depth that is actually quite astonishing, that also has spiritual dimensions to it. And kalam basically is the articulation of Islam's doctrines, rooted in the Quran and the Sunnah and the great tradition of the ulama of this deen, but also open-ended, as it says in the Quran, the description of the kalima tayyiba, asluha thabit wa far'uha fis sama, deeply rooted in the tradition, but open-ended unto the heaven. And that's how it gives a fruit. It gives the fruit with the permission of its Lord in every age. What we're trying to do is to basically find an authentic Muslim discourse that can be re-articulated in a convincing and updated way in order to not do counter-narrative, as the CVE experts say, but to actually do authentic narrative. We should not be doing counter. We should do the authentic narrative, the authentic Islam, because the authentic Islam is so powerful, it will drive away all false narratives like the narrative of ISIS. You can see right through it if you have an authentic narrative. That is why the CVE challenge, or the counter-violent extremism challenge, is not just a security issue. And I do believe in security solutions. I actually advise His Excellency the Prime Minister on national security, and I do believe that there are security measures that have to be made. There are also military measures that have to be made to protect borders, for example. But in addition to this, you need to fortify the hearts and minds of young people. You need to give young people meaning, whereby they don't have to go to the meaning peddlers, because they have real meaning in their lives. You need to preserve meanings that have been so patiently not only developed, but kind of preserved in your own nation. Part of your identity as a nation, as a country, as Malaysia, is this amazing Muslim tradition that combines Ash'ari doctrine, for example, and Ash'ari approach to basic beliefs about the meaning of life in general. Okay? That's what Iman is all about. Plus Shafi'i fiqh and usul that actually elaborate a very elegant jurisprudence that is open for development through usul al-fiqh, and tasawwuf and spiritual development of the usually the Hadrami type, Ba'alawi, or sometimes Qadiri and Shafi'i and Shadili. This combination of addressing faith, addressing jurisprudence and the regulation of life, and the spiritual life all together is something that you are getting quite naturally. Most people in Malaysia get it from their mother and father, grandmother, aunt, the village, not necessarily having done real study, not necessarily in any schools. But the manners, the adab you learn from your own family is something that did not just come by coincidence. It is the result of 1,400 years of development and 1,400 years of inheritance of lights and insights and wisdom that comes all the way from Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his Sahaba and Tabi'in radwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. This inheritance has shaped itself in a very particular way, in a unique Malaysian way. Why should the Malaysians give this up and borrow from some Saudi Arab preacher who actually has nothing to do with this inheritance, who comes from a completely different school with a completely different history? It's basically a reduced form of Hanbalism in a very, very narrowed way. It's not even real Hanbalism. It's kind of a pseudo-Hanbalism, I would call it. Okay? Why should you take that and throw away all that your mother and father have given you in your own society, when that set of meanings that they gave you is not only precious and useful and helpful for you to know who you are, but it's actually authentic. It is actually Salafi in the sense of real sense of Salaf. The Madahib al-Arba'a are all Salafi. They all have a salaf that goes all the way back to Medina, to Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Preserve this. This is extremely important. I had the great honor of speaking in the Mahkama Shar'iyya to some of the distinguished muftis and shuyukh. And I told them, as an Arab, I come to learn from you how to preserve this. Don't lose it. And do not send your children off to learn things that are not befitting for you. They're better, develop your own institutions with your own mashayikha. And if you want to send people off, send them at a mature age where they have become already an usuli, they have become already a mutakallim, they have already become a faqih. So they know how to choose and how to select. Don't lose your kids to other places. In Libya, we used to be Ash'ari, Maliki, Shadili usually. This was the combination that we had. Now, people with the traditional set of meaning-giving structures are almost, I wouldn't say a minority, we are still the majority in terms of numbers, but in terms of power and empowerment, we're almost powerless. Our madrasas are systematically attacked, our mosques are stolen from us, our saints are dug up from their graves, our libraries are burnt. And why? It is because we lapsed. Unfortunately, it has to do with the wrong policies of the previous government of eradicating religious learning. But we allowed stuff to come to us from Saudi Arabia, sometimes from Saudi Arabia via the United States, because they control so many of the Islamic centers in America. You go there and you come back with basically Saudi doctrine. And this is not, when I say Saudi, I do not mean it as a state, okay? What I mean is the religious outlook of the Saudi society. So I believe that it is extremely important, if you want to fight ISIS, is to inoculate against it. You know, treating polio after you've been struck is almost impossible. Inoculating against polio is very simple. Just a few drops in the mouth to a child, and they don't get polio. Alhamdulillah, polio is almost eradicated because of this. Inoculation is much easier than trying to treat the disease after it has struck. Do not lose your future generations by allowing them to be fed with these poisons that actually have nothing to do with Islam. So education is extremely important. And what do you put in your schools? Why should your manhaj in the madrasa? This is something that I find most strange about our Libyan society, for example. In the 19th century, early 20th century, kids used to sing the Burda, go to the Mawlid, they used to memorize certain aqidas very early on. Okay? By the time we get to the so-called modern world, we basically do away with the aqidah mutun, you know, like al-Barahim, we used to memorize it. We do away with Burda as a qasida. We do away with the Mawlid. Okay? And then we wonder why it is that somehow we're losing our kids. Why can't these things be integrated into curricula? The Arabic, for example, of the Burda is much higher than any of the junky poems that they taught us in primary school. It would have been much better Arabic, higher Arabic with better ma'ani, you know? Why can't we preserve some of these things that are already existing in your own tradition? Texts and poems from your own tradition that are seeped into into a history that is full of spirituality and insight. You know, one of the most striking things is what I call forgetfulness through familiarity. For example, if you are in a particular office for 10 years, you don't notice the frame on your wall anymore. If somebody comes from another country, they say, wow, what a nice painting. You know, they're struck by it. You forget your ability to appreciate what you have because it becomes so familiar. And some of the utterances we make them every day, we no longer reflect on their meaning. Things like, for example, the Basmala. Bismillahi ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Bismillah ar-Rahim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And we no longer reflect upon it. When you think about it, Asma'ullah al-Husna are 99, many Asma, Jabbar, Qahar, you don't find them in the Basmala. Why? It is because Allah Azza wa Jal wants you to focus on the fact that Islam is essentially Rahmah. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. It is Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran. That is the very source of your hidayah is because of Allah's Rahmah. We also say things like Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And even when we say the whole thing, which we Assalamu alaikum, you know, but when we say the whole thing, we don't reflect upon it. Islam is nothing but salam, rahmah, barakah. And the tahiyyat al-Islam is given such a dignified position in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, precisely because it's so essential. Now I tell you this, if I find that a movement or a book or a teacher or a preacher or a professor who teaches not salam but cruelty and violence, not rahmah but cruelty, and no barakah but actually eradicates barakah. No tombs are mubarak, no books are mubarak, no places are mubarak, no zaman is mubarak, so that they actually desacralize the world. One of the most interesting things about these movements is how desacralizing they are. You know, there's this famous book by Mirkia Eliade called The Sacred and the Profane. And he actually describes the sacred, describes the profane. Many of these movements are actually eradicate everything sacred. Not only the human life, which is the most sacred, it is actually said in the hadith that it is more sacred than the Kaaba, that killing someone innocent is worse than them destroying the Kaaba, and we forget this, okay? But it's also devastating of human culture. All the monuments are blown away, and they celebrate this, big hammers, you know? They come to the most beautiful Ottoman mosques in Tripoli and they destroy them. Sometimes they blow them up. Why? Because these guys cannot tolerate the existence of barakah. They cannot tolerate the existence of peace. They cannot tolerate the existence of compassion. Why? It is because it is fascism. Mussolini used to stand in the middle of Rome and teach the Italians just that violence is holy. Okay? That peace is for the wimps and the weak. He used to teach them that there should be no rahmah, that there should be total cruelty with your opponents. And that's exactly what these guys teach. So what I'm trying to say is that in your very tradition, basmala is actually preserved. In the tarahum that is amongst villagers, and in the way that people treat each other, in the salam that is in Dar es-Salam in Malaysia and Indonesia and in neighboring countries, Islam here did not come to you with armies or swords. It came through with peaceful people who believed in these things that I'm talking about. And they taught them here, and people respected them. And the reason they respected them is because they actually were quite aligned with their own indigenous sense of sacredness around them, the respect they had for their environment and for each other. And alhamdulillah, these lands became Muslim in this gentle way. Do not lose this gentle way by importing Arab contraptions that have nothing to do with Islam, that have nothing to do with the madahib al-arba'a, that have nothing to do with the true aqeedah of Ahl-Sunnah wa Jama'ah, Sad al-Maturidiyya and Sad al-Ash'ari. And I dare say that maybe it's too late for some parts of my world, but maybe it's not so late for you. And that is because you have historical institutions. From the monarchies of this great land, to the great ulama structures of this great land, to also the lineage of scholars and professors and teachers. I think you have many gifts, not only to give to Malaysia, but actually to give to us and to remind us of. So I came here to learn from my students, former students, because I used to teach at ISTAC for 1 year back in 1997, and now they're all great professors and teachers and administrators, and I have learned a lot from them. And I have come to learn from your scholars and most importantly, from the adab of your people. You know, Sidi Amran arranged the one item he used with the ambassadorial position was that he got me a motorcycle to open the way, which has been great for the traffic jam. But this man, the motorcycle rider, Suhail has been taking hundreds of photographs of him, is an amazing human being. He's a very little man, very short. I think he's white. Okay? First of all, because I don't think anybody can ride the motorcycle in that dangerous way and survive. Okay? But this is not the only karama he has. The man has so much adab, so much gentleness, so much, he's just really special. Okay? This person probably did not read Ilm al-Kalam, probably did not read Usul al-Fiqh or Risala or the great books of the Shafi'iyya scholars, but he embodies it. It is in his khuluq. As Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was asked about Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what was the manner of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? She simply said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. He actually embodied it. How does that happen? It happens through the transmission of wisdom, the transmission of patience, of love, of compassion, of kindness, the very core of Islam. So, I am not here to teach anything but to learn from you. And I am here to express my utmost gratitude to who you are and to urge you, please, do not become Arabized, okay? With all due respect to all the Arab families who have settled here. I don't mean it as an attack on my own nation, but what I'm trying to tell you is much of what is written in the Arabic language lately has nothing to do with the great tradition of Islam. There are exceptions. Morocco is a great exception, where there is a great king who's overseeing, as Amir al-Mu'mineen, a great set of Muslim scholars who are preserving Moroccan values. And because of that, the Arab Spring came and went without destroying Morocco, because they are grounded institutions. Jordan is like that, where there is a monarchy and some ulama who are very serious and who work very hard at it. There are exceptions in the Arab world that are actually quite instructive. Unfortunately, in Libya we lost our king, and I pray that our actual prince, who may be king, inshallah may be king one day. I personally have been advocating monarchy for over 3 years now, but it has not worked. But most importantly, in Rabitat Ulama Libya, we try to preserve the Ash'ari Maliki Sufi tradition of this great country, because it is only with our traditional values that are open unto the world, where we are in dialogue with other civilizations and human beings, can we preserve the values that are needed, not only to survive, but to thrive, and to give a civilization of life, instead of a pseudo-civilization of death. Thank you very much for being so patient with me, and forgive me for taking so long. Assalamu alaikum.
We have a particular mapping of the fascism and Nazism onto IS. Now, if you were to recollect the historical defeat of Nazism and fascism, will some of these measures in defeating the fascists also work for the ISIS?
Where I tell them that basically, you know, when Hitler began to rise and began to occupy other countries, the British Prime Minister Chamberlain went and cut a deal with him. It was called the policy of appeasement. Okay? And he cut a deal with him and came back very happy, and at the airport tarmac he waved the paper and said, this is a paper that will khalas, end all the war and so on, you know. That appeasement did not work with the Nazis. It actually encouraged Hitler to even be more aggressive. It is not until Churchill rose and actually told the British nation to resist and to fight. Okay? There have been many appeasers and many think tanks that have been advocating in London itself and in Washington, D.C., that people have to appease some of these movements. Not necessarily ISIS, but movements that actually feed into it, okay? And somehow accommodate it. I believe that that's a wrong policy. So this is one lesson from World War II. Another lesson from World War II is that the defeat of Nazism actually has a lot to do with the 4 freedoms that Roosevelt spoke of. These 4 freedoms are extremely important. The freedoms from fear and hunger, and the freedom of opinion, and I can't remember the 4th one. Maybe some of you have historians. Sorry? From one, yes. But anyway, I can't remember the exact detail, but it's called the Doctrine of the 4 Freedoms. And he basically, the 4 freedoms are basically having to do with the fact that humans do have certain wants and needs that have to be fulfilled, and that humans must never lose their dignity. And he upheld that, and they fought for it. And nowadays, many Muslims here and there criticize America for this and that, but that great generation of Americans that actually fought Nazism, okay, are definitely worthy of respect, and the values they fought for were actually Muslim values. They're not values that are absent from our own tradition, you know. And if you fight for fairness and for human dignity, you're fighting a Muslim fight. It's not; these are not foreign notions. Okay? So, having a set of values that you believe in and that you promote, and that you are willing to even fight for if you have to, and teaching these values to your kids and propagating these values through the media, through television, through every mean you can, through the social media, is extremely important. So there is a lesson to be learned. You should not appease evil as it rises, and you should call a spade, you know. Call it for what it is. And that you must have very clear messaging. To put it in media terms, you must have a strategic messaging or stratcom that's absolutely clear. You need to have these messages in formats that are easily deliverable. For example, we did some analysis on how propaganda of ISIS works, and we discovered, much to our astonishment, we did analysis on videos that ISIS in Libya used as propaganda videos, and found out, for example, when they take pictures of a tank being hit by them, that the way they choreograph the whole thing and they do the editing is identical with video games where tanks are hit. So it actually appears that these editors actually crafted the videos to be identical with the kind of imagery that a video game player would be familiar with. These kids who are being indoctrinated by these evil people are being entered into through the very means on which they spend hours on. A child nowadays, unfortunately, spends more time on a video game than with their mother or father. And they discovered that the real mother and father is the video game, so they're using the video game to get to your kids. Okay? The other thing that is very fascinating is it seems like the coldness when they're killing has a lot to do with the fact that in video games, by the end of the game, you would have killed at least 300 people in the video game. Once you do this all the time, if the propagandist is able to make you feel like you're in a game, you will kill with the same kind of coldness. We must study how they do this. We must study these, and the media people are extremely important for this. The magazines they publish are cleverly designed. The images they use are deliberately chosen. And again, the words, as you have, Professor, you're doing great work with this cognitive analysis and semantic analysis that you're doing. This is extremely important work. We must get to this, to the bottom of this, and find a way to salvage our language, our values, our ideas, and to give images of kindness and love. You know, I know of no other religion, okay, where giving water to a dog saves a person of the greatest of sins, okay? And this is in Islam. This is what should be there in the children's books, you know? And we must be very careful not to, because, you know, the Arabs, when they wrote history for the first time, they wrote history the way they chronicled the Jahiliyyah. How? In the way Arabs chronicled their history prior to Islam was through poetry that celebrated war. The attack on this, and the attack on that, and the attack on such a tribe. So it was a series of ghazawat. When Muslim historians began to record the history of Islam, they followed the same pattern they know from the way they did history in the Arab world, which was to do a series of ghazawat. So when you read the book of Sirah, you get the impression that it was simply a period, like just a ghazwa after ghazwa after ghazwa, and that's it. But what's sandwiched between those ghazawat is not elaborated. You'll find it in the books of hadith, massive books. You will find that Rasulullah ﷺ used to stitch his own shoes. You'll find that he used to help his wife at the house. You'll find that sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you find that he was very kind and gentle with the kids, that he said that saving a dog can actually save your life in the hereafter, that depriving a cat of food and drink can actually put you in nar. Imagine a cat, let alone taking a human being and putting them in a cage and burning them alive on television. I mean, what kind of madness is this? How can people think that this is Islam, you know? So we need to recapture these images. We need to rewrite our traditional language and discourse in ways that are conducive to having all the right messaging for our young people to save them from this evil.
Now, my concern is this. The way I see it, I break it into two sets of situations where actually how actually to disintegrate or destroy Islam. One is they create new set of values which they will force us to swallow. For now, they are doing it using LGBT. You know, I think Azrael was how actually even back home here in Malaysia, they use quite a number of organizations to force us to accept their values. You know? So this is one way actually for them to dismantle us. The other way actually is through rebranding of Islam. How they equate Islam with terrorism. They use the basic needs, as what happened to the Arab Spring. After that, they create new one, ISIS, you know, to slow down Syria so that Syria will not, what they call it, continue to threaten Israel. Now they create many more, Daesh and so on and so forth. So what will be the new brand of Islam that they will create from your experience, from your engagement with those people? What will be the next one? I think they won't stop just at Arab Spring, ISIS and Daesh. They will continue, you know, because they know on our side there are what they call it loopholes on our side, the weakness on our side, you know, which we are a bit slow, as you said just now, to inoculate ourselves so that we Muslims are getting immune to this kind of thing, or chef ourselves with some kind of defense mechanism, you know. So from your experience, what would be the new value system that they're going to force us to swallow, and what would be the new brand of Islam that we're going to create so that we are continuously to be disintegrated?